Welcome back. Another edition of the Columbia Cougars Coaches Show here on Mediacom Channel 22. My name is Cosmo. I work with the Zimmer Radio Group and also here for Columbia College with broadcasting webcasting different sports. And a new addition here to the Coaches Show as we've added new sports. Tim Cornell, cross-country coach for the men and women. First of all, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, two teams, 7 for the guys, if I think that's right, and
Yep.
6 for the women. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you are the head coach of both.
Yes, I am.
Do you have any other coaches on your staff, or how does that work?
I have an assistant coach. Her name is Laura Harris. She is from Nova Scotia, Canada, originally ran for the University of Tulsa. Ended up marrying a St. Louis boy, and he's at vet school. She's helping me out with the cross-country team.
Very cool. Now, let's rewind the tape and go back before there were an assistant coach or any of those 13 athletes that you have. You're from Columbia.
Yes.
You ran at Hickman High School and have some state medals hanging. Do you still have those medals? Where are those?
I think my mom framed them. They're in a picture album somewhere.
Shadow box in a hallway.
Something like that.
And those were mostly cross country. Do you also run track and field too, right?
Yeah, I have 2 state championships in cross country and then 2 in track and field.
Do you ever get any bragging rights in on old buddies when those come out?
Just my roommates from college.
That did not have a state medal.
Right.
So, and then you also were at the University of Missouri and ran for them in both cross country and track and field. Is that correct?
That's right.
And all kinds of Big 12. I don't want to make this a bragging session, but you've got an impressive resume as far as the competitive nature of it, which obviously leads then into probably why you wanted to compete and become a head coach in the sport of cross country.
Absolutely. It's a natural transition. I love track. I love cross country. So sharing the knowledge that I'd accrued at Hickman at the university was the logical step for me.
And all of a sudden one day you hear help wanted, job opening. Here we go. Columbia College is expanding with the addition of the golf programs and the cross country programs, and then the women's soccer team. And here we are.
Right.
You aced the interview. Obviously, they gave you the job. So
I guess I did something right. So
Bob Birch and a few extra Diet Cokes. And
something like that.
So then they say, okay, you're hired. Here you go. What happens next? How do you begin building a cross-country program?
The first step for me was finding the right kids, and knowing the state of Missouri well, being a Missouri high school athlete, being a University of Missouri athlete, that's where I wanted to start. We're located in the middle of the state. We're obviously a town that cares quite a bit about education, about recreation. So I've always thought Columbia was a great recreation town. I wanted to show it off to the rest of Missouri and get the right kids from around the state to be here. I wanted to really start with Missouri as our base. And that's what we've done. We've recruited some very high-level athletes, and I mean that was step one. You can't race without really good athletes. So that was the first phone calls that I started making. Coaches, athletes. You know, you can plan as much as you want, but if you don't have the athletes to race, then you're not going to be very good.
Now, as far as the actual competition is concerned, and we'll get into more of the athletes in another segment here in a minute, but someone like myself, I'm familiar with cross country, but as far as when is your competitive season?
Cross country is in the fall. Track and field is in the winter and the spring in college. So we started in the beginning of August, and that was cross country specific training. Most of the summer was spent accruing miles, so the guys ran anywhere from about 50 to 70 miles a week during the summer.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
that's okay.
If I remember right, this summer it was 198 in the shade.
Right.
So how do you balance that training, outside running, with the heat, and how did you balance that?
You either go before the sun comes up or after the sun goes down.
You're still running the 26 miles.
Exactly.
The number was. And where do you practice? You don't have, it's cross country. You're not just running laps around the track necessarily. Right. How does that fit?
Well, and that's why Columbia is such a great place to be. We have wonderful facilities. We practice in the turf room. We meet, we stretch, we do our warming up inside. And then we go outside. We're running all over the place. You know, if you've been around the central part of Columbia, you've probably seen our group out and about, either on the MKT trail, headed to the MKT trail, or headed down to Stevens Lake Park, where we do most of our workouts.
And that's a fantastic facility. I mean, and they're expanding it. It seems like every week there's another addition to
Absolutely.
That park. Is one of our favorite as well. And you do see between you guys and some of the Mizzou athletes and the high school teams, cross-country teams running all over the place, especially on a beautiful fall day. So
yes.
Now, competitive-wise, when you host a meet, I guess, or how does that? I mean, what is the official? You've got our Marvin Owens soccer field out there. You have the Southwell complex, but where would a meet be if you were to host one in Columbia?
Well, we haven't run into that problem quite yet. It's year one. I wanted to get the athletes accustomed to college. I really wanted to break them in, send them other places, get used to traveling on the road because most of our competitions are on the road. In the future, we'll probably host a meet, hopefully a conference meet next year or in the year after. There are a couple different places in Columbia that you could host it. You start with the golf courses. If somebody's willing to let you use their golf course for a morning, then that's always a great place to be. The footing's great, the grass is great. And from there you go to the parks. There have been cross-country races out at Cosmo Park, around the soccer fields. A. Augustine Golf Course has been the site of Mizzou's home meet for quite a long time and was the original Missouri cross-country championship site years and years ago.
So that you just they race next to the cart paths, or how, I mean, down to Sand Bunker 4 and turn right?
We try and stay on.
Yeah.
We try and stay in the lengthier grass. Yeah, we stay off the tee boxes and greens for the most part.
Yeah.
So
every once in a while.
yeah,
Someone tries to get an advantage.
it's really up to the coach who designs the course. And some coaches like a flat course, some like a hilly course, but most are trying to make their athletes, give their athletes an advantage somehow. So if your team's one that races fast on a flat track or a hilly course, then you're trying to make sure that your team is set up to race well whenever you do host a meet like that.
And what is the distance? Is it the same for every meet? You're always going to run blank number of miles, and what is that number?
Our women typically race 5,000 meters, so that's just over 3 miles. Our guys race 8,000 meters, which is just under 5 miles. Okay. That changes a little bit at the beginning of the meet. You might see it at the beginning of the year. You might see us run something just under race distance as we're a little bit higher in mileage, training really hard. But once we get into the main part of the season, those are the 2 race distances that we use.
And obviously it's rain or shine, and
well, sometimes, yeah. For the important meets, yeah, rain or shine, as long as it's not lightning, we're going. We have a lot of fun racing in the rain, but we've got to keep the athletes safe. That's our main consideration.
It's a cross-country coach, Tim Cornell, with us here on the Coaches Show on MediaCom Channel 22, coaching both the men and women at Columbia College. It's a team sport, but they're also scored individually. So a lot of times in the write-ups and the readouts, you'll see such and such, finished second, the team finished in whatever place. Explain a little bit how that works.
Sure. Cross country and track and field work differently. So cross country is much more a team sport than track and field. There are team dynamics. We all race together. We all get on the same line in cross country. And even though we're given an individual place and time, our first 5 runners across the line count for our team score. So if we place 1 through 5, that's 15 points. That's the best that we can ever possibly do. Typically a conference race is won between 35 and 40 points, sometimes a little bit less than that, just depending on the size of the race. Our 6 and 7 runners can act as displacers. So if we get our 6 and 7 runner across the line before somebody else's 5, we can push their number a little bit higher. So it behooves us to be really deep and have as many good runners as possible.
And does every team race the same number, or is it just depends on the team? Everybody has 5 or 7 or 6?
It really depends on the meet. So obviously you're trying to get everybody who you have a good race. Right. Some teams have 5 good runners, some have 12. And depending on the race that you go to, they'll let you run 12 runners, 10 runners, something like that in a varsity race or in a collegiate race. There are also sometimes there are B races, something like that, to get everybody the experience that they need. Because there are shifts that happen in teams. Somebody's 7 runner might switch, and the 5 runner and 7 runner might have off days, and you have guys back in the pack who step up those days and become your 5 and 7 runners. So having guys who can run at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on really helps a team develop a sense of competition every single day in practice, and helps you on race day.
And certainly much more of a competitive nature than I ever imagined until hearing that more. It's almost, in some regards, kind of like the roller derby in a way where you're bringing that pack forward competitively. Yeah. And it, to some people don't realize it can get a little feisty out there. Not quite football tackling, but you are competing for space, and a lot of times with a pack of runners, it can get pretty tight.
Absolutely. There are a lot of courses that start out pretty wide. Technically, you're supposed to have 400 meters to narrow it down to 10 meters into the race. But everybody's fighting for that position. Everybody thinks that they're in it in the first 400 meters, and nobody's nice about the fact that they want to be ahead of you. Cross-country runners are just as competitive as basketball players, football players, and every other sport. We're there to hold our position and beat the other guy.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the athletes that you have on both of the squads here in our next segment, and talk a little bit about what you've already competed with and what the future brings for the Columbia College cross-country squad. We'll be back with the coach more right after this Cougar Coaches Show here at MediaCom Channel 22.